is here, this behind me.
Yeah.
When I teach, I'm always like this the whole time.
Oh, yeah, no, I get you.
Hello.
Not sure. I have Sean, do you have slides?
Donna, do you have slides?
I do. Yeah. Should I pull them up?
Okay.
So maybe if she has screen share.
Yeah, it looks like, let me see if it'll let me
Yeah, that's
share.
great. So we'll screen share you whenever your turn is to go. So we're sort of pass the
Can you see my
baton.
screen?
We'll get you to screen share.
Cool. Can you see it right now? Just to check it?
Yeah, we can see them. They look great.
Okay, great.
So yeah, I think
You
if you
know,
can.
thanks for
So what we'll do is load the. You can't see me. Oh.
Oh, hi.
What we'll do is load each slide, each PowerPoint slide, do the transition. I think.
Wait, I'm sorry, say that one more time.
We'll end up. We each have a PowerPoint, so we're each load the slide deck through each speaker.
Oh, you don't want to do that ahead of time?
I have them all pulled up, but I think they're not in one PowerPoint, so we're gonna have to roll one after the other.
Yeah, so because we don't have them in one continuing PowerPoint, we just have to go in and out of each of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be uploading them like in front of the audience trying to. Right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. So everybody will
okay.
be able to see everything. It'll just be, we'll have some transition times between.
Yeah. That makes sense. Cool.
Old school style.
Yeah.
Will when we have Q&A, will there be a mic so that I can hear you really well?
Yeah, so there's this little pin mic.
Okay, perfect. Great. I see.
And so we'll
like
use that to speak and then pass it to audiences for.
Okay, cool.
It'll be a fun game. It's been fun all
Yeah.
conference. Whack-a-mole, mic style.
Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful that people are willing to do this hybrid because I would have been sad not to be able to be a part of this, even though I wish I could be there in person. So
I think so.
Okay.
If y'all are okay with the order, that was a
Yeah.
little.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure if Chris has some slides or.
Do you know if Chris has slides too? Chris,
I don't see.
She might just be talking, so that's cool.
I'm not sure that these.
Yeah, but that's
For some reason they're not.
Do you have to drag it over?
oh yeah, it's an expanded screen instead of a duplicate screen. So what you might do is duplicate it instead. And then, yeah. Chris, do you have slides here? No.
Okay, cool. We're just
That's
waiting
exactly
for
what we
the
want to hear.
slides.
I heard this is the room
HE double hockey sticks.
Yeah.
the well, we're zooming Shauna in.
She's
and,
on.
Hi, Shauna.
But it wasn't working very well the last 2 days, so we'll cross our fingers. Lindsay knows this.
By the way.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Oh, I want one. Good morning.
That's the microphone.
So they can hear, so Shauna can hear us. Oh.
That's,
You know what, you guys little friend, because she has more important things to say than I do. Oh my God. Oh, poor thing. Oh. I didn't even ask Sherry. I just took 2 and ran. Yeah, that's the difference between, and being an undergrad. Yeah. You don't even ask.
At the end of the session, could we get a picture?
Oh,
That'd be great.
please, that would be awesome.
I'm terrible at remembering that I actually do things. And so been trying to take more pictures.
Oh, no.
So they rebooked, I didn't tell Stace why, but they're like, oh, we booked you for tomorrow. I'm like, you don't have a room, cancel.
Oh, no.
So it was, we ended up canceling the original flight and then booking a new flight to go back tonight. That's like not correct, but
Oh.
it's like, so I'm like, I'm here, we're good, like,
Yeah, oh, that's
just
such a
always, I feel like
pain.
there was always like something conference that we got, right? Like,
Yeah,
seldom ever goes smoothly, but that's fine.
yeah.
You said you were in Miami, internship with in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
First, right?
Yeah.
So you get to work with Emily.
Oh,
I love her little
She
chair.
was on my master's
Yeah.
committee.
yeah.
I wish she had.
Graduated the year after I did
Yeah.
from Purdue.
Two.
Is that the same year you did?
No, I was 18.
Okay.
Yeah, she came with 2016.
So you're 13.
12.
12. So 12. Emily was 16.
Oh,
15.
okay, cause she do,
I
oh,
think
she
she
did
did her
MA.
She did it.
Okay, yeah,
She's probably like
that makes
there.
So yeah, no, she's 16.
yeah.
I'm 18, and then Sweater Vanya is, which is great.
Yes.
My 20
Yeah, yeah.
What I'm learning too is that not here to start.
Oh.
Our students who have started next 20 years.
Have a couple of those.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yes. Well, is it because it's in full screen for the PowerPoint? You should break that.
I see her. I want to make sure she can, yeah.
Do you have the mic, Chris? You
Oh,
ask
yes.
Shauna
Yes,
if
yes,
she
yes.
can-
Here, I'll do it.
Oh, I changed it because we couldn't see the slides.
Yeah.
So you'll need to drag them all over.
No, we want it to be.
That's what I just did.
Yeah.
Undid. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what we want.
Yeah.
It's the same thing on both screens. That's what we want, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so make sure we're on the same page here. Are you fine with that? Okay.
Can I ask a quick question? Oh,
Yeah, Shauna, you can ask a question.
so I see that there's not, the chat in Zoom isn't enabled, but there's like a chat within Huva. Is that right?
The chat in Zoom is enabled on the host side.
Okay, but people can't put questions.
Oh,
in
they've
there.
taken the chat and out of Zoom totally.
Okay, so I didn't know if we're supposed to be keeping an eye on the Huva site in case people do post questions. I wish we could just have the chat and since people are joining via Zoom, but
Yeah, the graduate student is reading those questions out of the Hoover site to be. in
okay,
the
great.
Q&A.
So we don't have to be monitoring that. Okay, cool. Thanks.
We cheated and we had 2 Zooms open during my session.
Everyone needs the entire screen. So whenever we're ready to do this, this is the first PowerPoint. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and do some slideshow from the beginning. And then everyone, see that? And you're still in my, that was like my time to. I know you asked, I just realized right now. You asked for information. On the screen, you're not open, I just started. Yeah, I see that now. That was very good, okay. Yeah, you can show them, you'll be able to, they'll be able to see it and. Now, whenever you switch to the next one, it's still right here.
She was like, I wanted to have your picture. We did all of our photos.
My current belief in the world is that it's only ever 15 minutes. How bad
Yeah,
can it be?
no,
That's it, I like that.
yeah, hopefully, yeah, it'll be there, yeah.
Yes, of course.
Oh, okay, okay. No, take your time, it's all right.
And then just, is this the clicker still working?
The clicker has an attitude. Oh, I think the clicker is gonna go in the track.
So maybe the grad student can advance the
Yeah,
slide.
she can just.
I can just tell you it's fine, okay.
Sorry, I make pretty good eye contact. You just give me a little nod or something.
Okay, I mean, I have little things that tell me to change slides, like.
What was your name?
Marley.
Marley, that's what I thought.
Thank you, Marley.
So we don't call you the grad students?
We can give you a name.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to. Okay, I'm kind of giving up on the clicker once, that's up to y'all.
Is it yours? Oh, I trust your tech. If it was my tech, I'd be like.
Shauna, we're just, if you can hear me, we're just getting the computer squared away.
Okay, so it's not letting people control their own slideshow who are in person?
Yeah.
Weird.
Oh, Marley.
Oh.
Everyone shut your Zoom.
We're gonna do that when you. We know that. You guys see. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Try it. Yeah.
I'm not.
It's like teaching, right?
Ready, Marley? So good? Okay.
Good morning, all. Thank you for being here. We know you have a lot of awesome presentations to attend, so we're grateful that you decided to attend ours this morning. My name's Chris Elder. I'm an associate professor at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. And I have the absolute honor to sit on this panel with these two scholars here and another scholar joining us from Zoom. So first I want to, I'll introduce all three scholars, and then we'll begin with Mandy's. Well, I'll give you a brief overview of what to expect for the special issue of the WAC journal that'll be coming out, transforming WAC at 50, where these scholars have submitted articles for. It's going to be a really exciting issue. I'm looking forward to it. So let me pull up my screen here. So we'll begin with Dr. Mandy Olejnik. Mandy is at the Miami University of Ohio. She works in the Howe Center for Writing Excellence. Mandy joined the Howe Center staff as a graduate assistant in 2017 and works now as the assistant director of writing across the curriculum. So, you know, if Liz Wardle identified Mandy as a graduate student, Mandy has to kick ass. Her research centers on graduate student writing support and how writing across the curriculum programs can take leading roles in creating meaningful structural change in systems of graduate writing. At the Howe Center, Mandy leads faculty workshops, assists with the Faculty Fellows Program, writes Miami Writing Spotlights, conducts research on the Howe Writing Center programming, and handles other administrative tasks, as you can imagine. And I should have said Dr. Mandy Olejnik, sorry. Transferring in between.
She has about 100 tabs.
Yeah, sorry. My desktop though is sparkling. It's clean. Dr. Sherry Craig, I've had the great fortune to know since alums of Purdue. Yeah, it's crazy. Purdue. Yeah. I'll tell you a story later. Dr. Sherry Craig is an assistant professor of rhetoric and writing in the Department of English at Virginia Tech, where she researches how universities and workplaces implement diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives, particularly for the recruitment and retention of Black women. She also considers the ways in which diversity initiatives can be located in writing across the curriculum programming. She regularly offers courses and workshops on navigating diversity and inclusion practices in the workplace and across the curriculum. Dr. Craig's current research is for a book manuscript on higher education institutions, language of commitment since the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Her published work can be found at sparkactivism.com. I'll repeat that. Sparkactivism, all one word, .com. The Journal of Multimodal Rhetorics, Prompt, and in the WPA Writing Program Administration Journal. As a native of Arizona, she was raised in the borderlands and mountains and in a lifetime admirer of tacos, cacti, and pine trees. She lives with her spouse, and beautiful child in Roanoke, Virginia. And you need to come see me in New Mexico, both of you. And our third scholar, zooming in, who has graciously joined us over the internet. Dr. Shauna Shapiro is an associate professor of writing and linguistics at Middlebury College in Vermont. Her research focuses on college transitions and innovative pedagogies for multilingual L2 writers. Shapiro's work has appeared in many peer-reviewed journals, including College Composition and Communication, Research in the Teaching of English, and Composition Studies. She has also written for more public audiences through Inside Higher Ed and The Conversation. Shauna's most recent book, published with Routledge in 2022, is entitled Cultivating Critical Language Awareness in the Writing Classroom. She has been working to build community around critical language awareness pedagogy through her creation of the CLA Collective, an online resource hub and gathering space. http:// CLA Collective, all one word, .org. For more information and to join the collective's email list. Formerly a middle and high school teacher, brave woman, I could never do that job. It's so hard. Shauna has also contributed to a number of initiatives aimed at improving educational equity for English learners in her local community in Burlington, Vermont. So please welcome Mandy, Sherry, and Shauna to the room. Originally, I was going to start by telling you something about the journal, but since we're getting a late start, I think it's going to be more important to hear from those present first. Thank you.
Thanks, and I think I'm gonna get going first. Unfortunately, our clicker doesn't work, but we have some assistance. So I was already introduced, so hello. I'm so excited to talk with you all today about my article coming out called Potential of WAC in Graduate Writing Support, Helping Faculty Improve Systems of Graduate Writing. So you can go to the next slide. I have a few points I'll be focusing on today, and hopefully we can have some discussion afterwards, right? So I'm going to overview WAC in undergraduate versus graduate writing support historically and in practice, provide some brief examples of faculty changing graduate level writing structures with support from WAC programming, talk about toward WAC programs serving as an important boundary broker, if you were at Liz's talk earlier, this idea of helping faculty change writing systems, including at the graduate level, and hopefully have some time for discussion. So go to the next slide. I'm going to start with undergraduate versus graduate writing support. Next slide here. All right. So WAC as a movement was born partially in response to the increased role and attention to undergraduate disciplinary writing, as we know, as well as in response to public concerns about students' abilities to write. Barbara Relvard's seminar at Central College and Elaine Naiman's teaching groups at Beaver College are often cited as the beginning of the WAC movement. So while these folks and others did not specify the exact level of student writing and assignments discussed in these WAC initiatives, it's assumed to be undergraduate level writing, especially given the institutional context being at four-year private colleges dedicated to undergraduate education. Undergraduate level writing differs from graduate level writing in key ways, as there is an important transition that occurs in students' writing and learning as they're expected to write in increasingly disciplinary and public-facing ways, amongst other things. And so if the activity of writing at the graduate level differs from that at the graduate level, then the writing instruction would also differ and benefit from specific pedagogical support, which is what my argument is here. If you go to the next slide. So similar and related WAC movements tend to also focus predominantly on undergraduate writing instruction. So the writing enriched curriculum model tends to favor undergraduate writing, helping departments and programs develop undergraduate writing plans. At Minnesota, from what I understand, the WAC office is actually a unit within the Office of Undergraduate Education, which keeps that purview in undergraduate writing and ostensibly not to focus on graduate writing support. It happens at different centers, different places. And so WAC is also historically included overseeing advanced writing courses and sequences on campuses, which again are undergraduate level initiatives that we have here. And this is not to say that efforts to work on matters of graduate writing did not or do not exist in broader WAC contexts. We do it, a lot of people do it, it happens, that these contexts don't relate, but these accounts are largely anecdotal. However, with a few published accounts circulating in the field, specific WAC professional development for faculty around teaching graduate level writing does not appear to have been the original intent of WAC or its current focus, but it should be and it could be. So next slide here. There's also extensive work done across writing center studies to support graduate students themselves as writers. And it's important to note that a lot of WAC initiatives have been closely aligned with the work of writing centers. At some places, the WAC program and the writing center is the same place and it's the same person, right? Writing center studies exist as an important hub for supporting graduate student writers themselves, though, too. So there have been numerous edited collections dedicated to this topic. I have a few listed here, some really great work coming out. In these collections, though, the focus is primarily on supporting graduate student writers themselves as learners and not so much on the faculty who teach them. So again, how are we supporting people who are out there teaching these graduate students with these advanced ways of writing in these different contexts? And so while Simpson in the Supporting Graduate Writers collection notes the need for more explicit and intentional faculty development on working with graduate students as an area for further research, Sherry Wynn Purdue goes further to highlight the importance and necessity of it in the Rewriting the Center book. So as she argues, in order to truly help students become better writers in the system of graduate school, they need for their advisors to have more explicit preparation for and knowledge of the writing process than their own experience as supervisees had provided. So WAC, as I argue, can serve on the other side of this coin in terms of preparing the faculty members to teach and mentor the writing of their own graduate students and to really reach a lot of students that way and help support them. So if you wanted to change slides. now the exciting part, talking about people actually doing this work and doing cool things, right? So I want to take a little bit of time to very briefly highlight some of the work being done at Miami to support graduate level faculty in teaching and mentoring graduate writing. I talked about these cases in a lot more detail in the article that's coming out, which you can read. So if you go ahead and change the slide, this is us at the House Center. All of these examples come out of this center. They're how writing across the curriculum program, HWAC for short, operates from the underlying belief here that if we change faculty conceptions about what writing is and how it works, then we can help them innovate practices for themselves in ways that make sense for their discipline. We offer numerous types of programming, like your Cornerstone Faculty Writing Fellows program that Liz was talking about earlier today, if you were there, other certificate programmings. And so while our programming, especially fellows, there's fellows right there on the left, doesn't specify the level of writing instruction faculty could work on, it was not designed to intentionally support graduate writers either. However, even though several teams who completed this program since 2017 have actually been innovating their graduate programs, the need was there. They came to us and they realized that's what they wanted to work on. So for example, as I'm going to talk about a little bit more later here, one of the early teams from fellows from gerontology began the program seeking to revise an individual course. And then after learning about threshold concepts and the important role writing plays across the students' entire time in their programming, decided to innovate the way they teach writing throughout their entire graduate program. Again, while not necessarily intentional here, HWAC served as an important source and inspiration of change for this group of faculty members who have gone on to innovate for themselves graduate writing supports and structures designed around writing studies, research, and best practices. They're doing really great work. They're really leading the way in their field for how to support writers. We've also offered several graduate-specific workshops and faculty learning communities following this theme. So overall, again, we've made some meaningful strides in supporting graduate writing instruction at Miami, including not only individual instructors' practices, but also in a larger, more systematic context, which is what my brief examples here will illustrate. So you can go ahead and change slide. So let's, Jennifer, can you get any money on a video earlier? So my first case details revisions that a faculty member, Jennifer, her, headed around the master's thesis and the Master of Gerontological Studies graduate program. So after participating in fellows in 2017, Jennifer and a couple of her colleagues set out to redesign graduate level courses and ended up reimagining how writing is supported across the program. So as Jennifer described it, the MGS program, the master's program, had historically adopted a more traditional social science thesis model where students developed a topic idea, selected an advisor and 2 readers, submitted a 5-page proposal, and then completed their empirical thesis. Students were struggling with this requirement since the majority of them did not continue on to academia actually, and it actually delayed their graduation from spring to summer, which was not good for the programming and for funding. So to address this tension that was identified, one revision that Jennifer took on was reviving a 700 level gerontology course, Gerontology 705, and completely making it a course about writing in gerontology. So this course served here as a direct support for the MGS students finishing their degrees, because as students took this course during their last semester writing their final project, more recently during the past couple academic years, they reframed it as a culminating paper based more on a journal article than a traditional thesis. Change the slide there, yeah. So Jennifer has continued to revise Gerontology 705 over the years, having converted it from a general, it was used to be like communication in gerontology, what does that mean? But now it is a writing workshop model focused more explicitly and dedicatedly to supporting graduate students in their writing. Throughout the course, MGF students work on their culminating paper, while doctoral students who also take the course can work on a journal article manuscript. She draws on writing about writing and engages students in genre analysis, where they break apart and critically examine each part of the scholarly. I've watched her do this. I sat in for her class, and she's an amazing writing teacher, one of the best writing teachers I know, and she's in gerontology. In addition, students submit components of their writing every week and receive feedback. So overall, students have a really robust writing education in gerontology through this series of change efforts that have been made with, you start in fellows, you say, we want to revamp our graduate program, and then how do we do this? We're going to continue it and support it there. So that's my first example. You could go ahead and change the slide. The second example I'll talk today is about comprehensive examination revisions made in the composition and rhetoric PhD program at Miami. So Jason, they, them, had long felt that the comprehensive exam was not ideal for both students and faculties, recognizing that it was an inherited structure that might have a history that we don't necessarily like. And so participating in a faculty learning community that we organized around building support structures for graduate students, Jason and their colleagues administered a survey to all current graduate students asking about their writing needs. Several of the composition and rhetoric students expressed concerns over this exam, noting issues and frustrations. And so there's just a tension here in this system with the comprehensive exam process where students were struggling, Jason and their colleagues were struggling. It just wasn't a good time, right? And so to start this change initiative, you can go ahead on the next slide. Jason asked for time during a faculty meeting to discuss the exam with others who taught in the CompRet program, which led to a subcommittee of faculty working to imagine a new structure. So together, the committee proposed a new structure designed intentionally around the social nature of writing, where students wrote a literature review on their readings over a period of months and could seek support and feedback on it from faculty and peers along the way. And so at this time, right now, it's about 2 years since this faculty learning community ended. Several students are undergoing a brand new exam process. I think it's going great. They're going to keep assessing it. It's based in learning. There's not as much of a struggle. So it took a few years, but it started with this seed in a faculty learning community that helped them go through here. So you can go ahead to the next slide. So these case examples illustrate faculty have great potential to improve the graduate writing instruction and change writing structures in their programs. I didn't have to tell them what to do. I helped them think through, we helped them think through what do you want students to learn, how do they do it? And they made such innovative changes, right? And so in this way, WAC programs can serve what Wenger calls boundary brokers to help facilitate this change. So in the comprehensive exam process, Jason and their composition and rhetoric colleagues hold invaluable knowledge about how writing works and were able to draft a new design that was well aligned with writing studies research. In gerontology, Jennifer and her colleagues felt guided by the programming, but they possessed the agency to revamp their curriculum, to not only change the master's thesis into a different paper, but also to require specific coursework, do all the paperwork that has to happen. So you can go ahead to the next slide. And so I know we're running on time, but I think there's leave some really interesting questions here about the potential of change here. So I have a few questions in the next slide. I want to know, and for us to think about as we move forward into the next 50 years of WAC, right? So how can WAC programs more intentionally and explicitly support graduate level writing instruction? I know not every school has a graduate program as graduate focused, that's fine. But if you do, how are you supporting those students, right? Who else in the campus ecosystem can assist you with these efforts? What is CTE doing, Center for Teaching Excellence? What is the graduate school doing? We partner a lot with our graduate school and they're really big allies for us. What are the needs around graduate level writing instruction on certain campuses? Do they need tips and tricks or do they need help redesigning structures? What is actually happening? And how can faculty and departments build from momentum established from other initiatives? You know, maybe they are doing some really cool undergraduate revisions. Can they extend that forward? So these are some questions that I would love to maybe talk about later in the session that builds some work with my article. And thank you all for having me here today.
So smart. I love it. Like, oh wow, that's awesome. Come talk more. I primarily work in Google Slides, and so turning this into a PowerPoint, looks like we're gonna have some broken stuff, but I didn't think to check because I don't use Microsoft projects. Anyway, hi. So I will do something radically different, I think, which is sort of talk about some origin for the article and then my own sort of branched off sense of my pieces in it. And I'll read a little bit and it's fun. It was finally checked at 5 a.m. this morning, so it's fun. My son is sick right now, so no. So it's longest time away from him, and he's ill, and everything hurts. But I'm going home after this, so it's okay. And so, thinking about the article origin, which is titled "Toward More Sustainable Anti-Racist Practices," is under some revision right now for publication later. This sort of started with my 2021, very brief, 750 words, maybe 1,000, I don't remember, piece in the 2021 special issue on sort of the chaos of the world in 2020, called "Your Contract Grading Ain't It." As far as I know, so far it's been used at 6 different universities and professional development conversations around contract grading and development. So that's really exciting. To be so short, it's been referenced and cited in other articles 7 times so far. I love it. It's so great. I was like, oh, I was a little drunk and I wrote that really quickly. Thank you for citing me. Shh.
And then do it.
Well, if you read the piece, you know that I'm a little angry at it. I'm sort of like, it's a little ranty. It's wonderful. I love it. It lost me some friends, which I love even more. Because we're not friends, right? They're like, oh, yeah, rah, rah. Anyway. And so Jeff, who's in the audience and is a wonderful person, and I knew through AWAC service, I'll say, at Florida Atlantic reached out to discuss the piece. We had a really great conversation based on some thoughts that he had and was sort of working through based on and his experiences with 1 foot or maybe 2 feet now into retirement. And sort of wanting to write and sort of wanting to get some thoughts down on the page. Through some conversations, he then brought in Barclay Barrios, also at Florida Atlantic, to help expand our thinking, and that grew as it does into an article. Jeff wanted an article from the start. He did not talk to me until he was like, "We are writing." I was like, "Okay, yes, thank you." As junior faculty do with senior faculty from the field who say, "You will write with me." So each author, me, Jeff, and Barclay, had varied experiences with considering implementing an enduring contract grading and alternative grading, such as ungrading, labor-based grading, participation-based grading, engagement-based grading, and all those other sort of grading but not grading. And so that sort of brought us together to think about bigger issues around power in particular. And so the big central argument of the article, and I sort of broke my rule into a lot of text, and I apologize, but this article explores several implications that demonstrate how and why alternative grading practices as the sole or primary strategy cannot achieve the long-term goal that they aspire to achieve. Contract grading and alternative grading practices, when localized, essentially are informational. They're not the endpoint. To replace the replacement of white supremacist treatments of particularly students of color and underprepared students in the US, it just can't do that. So instead, we propose a more systemic way of thinking that may move us towards a more sustainable solution for inclusivity across the curriculum. And so one of the key texts then that we're citing, of course, is Michelle Crow's and Jeff's and Dan Melzer's Sustainable WAC. If you haven't read it, great book. It's not here today, it's through NCTE, really reasonably priced. I'll plug it even more if you like me to, but it's a really great book. And even if you're not an administrator, it's really just something great to read through and really accessible. And so they provide a whole systems approach and basically argue that a WAC program that never moves beyond the micro level work is then difficult to sustain. So then what does it mean to think about all of the different factors and systems within a university campus and beyond it to sustain it further than just individual teachers and individual classrooms doing individualized work? One of the key figures that we then pull in from that book and sort of work through to think about anti-racist practices and sort of alternative grading thoughts is this figure. It's so funny because on my slides, it's all caps. And then you realize it just breaks into whatever's happening up there. And I get really anxious because that's not the way it's supposed to be. But sort of thinking about what does it mean to study a campus context, to then gather and support those goals, to implement big projects, and then manage their growth and change, and how that all feeds into each other as this continuous wheel of activity and growth and change, and then for sustainability. And so what we don't sort of see, I can say this as someone who has happily been pulled into my college's anti-racist pedagogy workshops and conversations and whatever, is that we sort of stop at key points in this wheelhouse to keep them sustainable, right? So we study the college context, right? We plan and set a goal for the fall semester. We developed a single project, and we are currently taking, right, a survey to sort of see what we can do so that we can do the same thing for our college again, right? And so it's sort of just like with the same body of people who show up for a 4-hour session with no lunch. And so then what sort of happens when we're not creating projects, not communicating outside of our halls, or even outside of our writing classrooms as we implement anti-racist pedagogy and anti-racist grading practices? Other folks that we sort of pull on, other sort of folks that we pull on and cite is Ellen Carrillo's has a brief book, which is actually really good. And we have an edited collection in pedagogy coming out next year, also about sort of thinking further beyond anti-racist and contract grading and labor-based grading. And then we lean on Foucault to really think about power in universities and sort of like the orientations of power. Ibram Kendi is a must because for reasons I can't explain sober. And then I really can't. Shauna Shapiro on the call, Michelle Crow's, and Shaka Semet's thinking about linguistic diversity and its relationship to this, and then Umbach's. These are just some key factors. We have many more citations, but these sort of give you a sense of it. One thing that's sort of absent from this that we've had some conversations about us sort of thinking about its other sort of understandings of power within university structures that comes out of feminist work and comes out of Black feminist work in particular for me and my interests, or even like Indigenous scholars are sort of thinking about other types of power, non-hierarchical structures of power. And so I always, whenever I talk about citations, I always say cite Black women because I can. And so then thinking about, yeah, it looks crazy up there. I can't.
It looks really pretty on the slide, on the computer.
Thank you so. And so then thinking about how this kind of article and this kind of conversation has the potential to just transform WAC. It's not just at 50 for me, but as Art said yesterday, like for the next 50, right? And so then thinking about that whole systems approach, which is mostly up there, okay. The whole systems approach to considering the ways in which anti-racist assessment practices and those anti-racist assessment pedagogy, so thinking about the individual actor versus sort of the larger reflection of those actions, can and must go beyond individual structures, individual courses, and individual writing programs. The article also starts to argue for a reinvented approach to alternative grading practices that can be recognized, respected, and supported by courses and departments across the curriculum. And if you know folks who are doing contract grading, it's not that it doesn't happen across the curriculum, it's that it feels really good for them to do it in their writing class for reasons that are rather subjective and rather morality-based and not necessarily rooted in what works for that campus, those students, that degree, that, right? Like, it's just like stakeholders and the conversation is so much bigger than what you are doing in your class. Or the difference of thinking about contract grading and labor-based grading practices in a 1,000 level first year writing class versus a 3,000 level, like junior level writing class, that's a WAC class, or a senior seminar of six of your best students taking some specialized topic, or a graduate course with a community engaged partner, where these things make sense at different types of classes. But what does it mean to say, okay, you first year baby freshmen, who are these gorgeous little people who are secure and confident at the same time, like sort of navigating this, to say, I'm going to undo everything that you know and get rid of all of the ways that you understand evaluation and grades and even writing, which we already try to do anyway, and evaluate you in this radically different way that you have not become fully participatory in, right? Or even aware that exists. So then thinking about encouraging writing, the next slide. It also works to encourage writing studies instructors and others who have adopted labor-based and other alternative grading practices to challenge their departments, colleges, universities, and employers outside of those universities, right? The folks who are hiring our students, which is always a conversation, to do more than simply adapt courses through an individualized approach for anti-racism across the curriculum, right? So it's not anti-racist assessment, but anti-racist assessment of a writing program, right? So you have classes that are doing anti-racist or contract grading or whatever, trying to be more inclusive. And then when you assess your writing program, you're still using white supremacist formal rubrics and assessments to assess the thing that you're trying to undo on the individual level. And when you send those numbers to your assessment office, they're using those same formal, hierarchical, strict white supremacist structures. So what happens is that more students are getting A's on the individual level. So you have that grade influx. You have that great, like, oh yeah, our students are doing better, but they maybe aren't writing better. So you're lying to yourself, and we all do this, but you're lying to your university. So the article also tries to and sort of thinks about ways that we can motivate writing instructors. You're one ahead, but okay, that's okay. Motivates writing instructors and administrators to partner with centers for teaching and learning and disciplinary faculty for a more meaningful, sustainable change. So that it's not just you, like in our silos as we create for ourselves and get forced upon us in these forced disciplinary lines, but what does it mean to do something that is already trying to educate faculty across the curriculum, right? Thinking about CTEs for teaching excellence or whatever it's at your university. Sort of going forward and like doing more and doing more sustainable. I always think, like, what would it mean for my mathematician colleagues to do contract grading? And why do they yell at me when I ask them that question? So the what, the how, and the for whom of WAC's presence and future. So the first line says, BIPOC faculty are less likely to use anti-racist approaches. Tenured faculty are less likely to use anti-racist approaches. STEM faculty are less likely to use anti-racist approaches to grading, to teaching, to their scholarship. So faculty and staff are less likely to be totally empowered to employ anti-racist approaches to pedagogy and assessment in sustainable and meaningful ways. You might have someone that's like, yeah, go ahead, teacher autonomy, have fun, do what you do. But because it's not carried out, right? Your president isn't saying down, your board of visitors, or your like outside people, your alumni, your employers, your community partners on saying, yes, undo the GPA. Undo the ways that you are evaluating your students and establishing methods of excellence. Undo the white supremacy that as soon as our students graduate, they will be experiencing. Have fun, right? And so like the conversation is just bigger than that. It's just bigger than here's what I'm doing in my class for myself. So I'm going to read just a tiny bit from the article as I can. It's about me. I don't want to give away all the goodies. So as an early career faculty, it's third person because it's an article. As an early career faculty member at a public institution with a high BIPOC student population, my former institution, Sherry was confronted with the complexities and problems of resisting a call for labor-based grading practices being implemented within her department and writing program. Her time as a student was filled with academic challenges, particularly in writing and English studies courses. In an effort to compose at the standards required of her, Sherry spent innumerable hours reading, writing, and revising her academic assignments, and ultimately attended graduate school and earned a doctorate in composition and rhetoric with a special attention to first-year writing programs and to instructor support. Her rejection of labor-based grading practices in the department in 2020 was received as irrational by senior white women faculty in the department. She was shocked that this very individualized decision of reinforcing her pedagogical approaches to teaching were wrong and seen as potentially racist. Sherry wanted to give students the same opportunity she was provided with improving her writing skills to the level demanded of her future employers, other professors, and of herself. By rejecting labor-based grading in her classrooms, it was less about the desire to reinforce inequitable conditions and more about the recognition that such inequities are unavoidable within the systems, within the current systems in place within her institution and outside of it. When discussing the possibility of adopting labor-based grading with her students, a diverse mix of races and experiences, one responded vehemently with, "That won't help me get a job, Dr. Craig." And this unfortunate consumer satisfaction model of the institution, it did have a point. How would her individual single class or even individual writing program where they had a singular anti-racist assessment experience help them and prepare them for their careers? Did they understand that they were the victims of a white supremacist system? Probably not. Did Sherry know better than them? Probably not. Was she being asked to alter her traditional grading practices in an effort to provide a pseudo-equity in an inequitable system? Probably. Sherry wanted to retain her autonomy as the instructor of her courses, and this included the assessment. To be clear, it's not that she didn't support others' decisions to choose alternative grading, but rather as someone who was more likely to receive lower scores in student evaluations of her teaching, Sherry did not want to add the weight of an already imbalanced scale used to consider her tenure and promotion by adding something new. While some might argue that alternative grading could improve her scores and the experience of her students in the course overall, she did not believe it was worth the risk, nor was there any evidence to that. Additionally, when Sherry inquired about challenging the assessment practices of all the courses in the department, not just the first-year writing courses, there was great resistance. When pondering the inequitable hiring practices that allowed for more BIPOC scholars to be hired into the department as adjuncts and non-full-time or tenuable lines, the responses used were silencing, like policy, protocol, budget. Revising program-wide assessment practices and hiring more diverse faculty does sustain a wider, more effective pedagogical approach and would increase that BIPOC student interaction, from Umbach, page 33. Addressing racism and broader structures beyond the individual classroom will also improve BIPOC student retention and matriculation, from Cross and Carmen. Sherry was skeptical of individualized anti-racist approaches and did not consider an entire system. Not systemic decisions to change the assessment practices in the classroom of a few faculty leads to all kinds of unintended consequences across the institution as students continue their studies under those traditional evaluation structures that they've experienced and will continue to experience. Taking a more system-wide approach could enable a more sophisticated and nuanced set of strategies across different levels of the institution, much in the same way that WAC programming has been successful for years and will continue to be so. Sherry's experience demonstrates why top-down mandates for curricular control in the classroom do not often lead to the desired results. Her rule-following behaviors different significantly from those of her white colleagues because they were not subject to the same kinds of pressures that she, as a Black woman, untenured faculty member in that department, was subjected to. And her efforts to point to the need for more systemic approaches to the desired anti-racist practices failed because the rule-following behaviors that governed the change in the composition classroom were not shared by the department, by the university, by her college, or by her I was a consultant for an aerospace engineering firm, and we would chat about it, and they'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, no, we need grades. We need to know that they know this, not that their effort is enough, not that their attempts to do something would satisfy the inequities that they experience. Like, they would say these things like sort of like shaking their heads and sort of being like, crazy Black lady, right, already, but crazy young Black lady who's coming in as an outside consultant wanting to talk about, you know, mentoring and recruitment practices for their new, like, potentially more diverse firm. All of that, they were just like, what? Which is okay. I think they had some really valid points. And I'm going to stop because I talked for a bit. Thank you so much. Thank you. There's a lot of other really good stuff that isn't that. It's Jeff and Barkley doing really amazing things that I can't control. No. There's other really great stuff in the article. We each have 3 narratives that interweave with this whole systems approach and sort of thinking about it at different points in the system, as an administrator, as an individualized teacher, and as a resistant individualized teacher. So my bit that I read is not reflective nor outside of what the entire article is.
Thank you.
Hi, Shauna. We're so
Hello.
glad you're joining us today.
Oh, I'm so glad. I wish I could be there in person, but I'm so glad I can be here in some way. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, and we have an
Okay.
awesome audience. They are also shiny and gorgeous and smart.
Yay. Of course they are. They're WAC people, right?
Yes.
Oh, well, I'm so thrilled I was able to be part of this panel. And I'm actually thrilled that I was third, because I think you'll see some echoes of the things that my other panelists shared in what I'm sharing about critical language awareness and what it has to offer to WAC work. So again, I'm Shauna Shapiro. I put down there the link that Chris read aloud for the CLA Collective. If you find yourself inspired and want to learn more about CLA, that's a great place to start. And I'll be offering online events throughout the summer where we just get together and talk about the relevance of critical language awareness to our work. So I hope to get you intrigued if you don't already know about CLA. So the framework of critical language awareness has been around for decades, and I'll talk in a minute about the history. But I had the chance when I was writing my book, my most recent book, to synthesize a lot of that research and kind of come up with my own definition based on the things that I had seen out there. So here's my definition of critical language awareness, or CLA. CLA is a mindset and a skill set that focuses on the intersections of language, identity, power, and privilege. It's an approach to teaching that aims to promote a more just future while also preparing students for the often unjust present. And we see that tension really clearly in what Sherry has shared, but we also see it in graduate work, as Minnie had talked about as well. And the ideological grounding for this, at least where I've seen it in applied linguistics, is critical pragmatism. The idea that we can be critical and pragmatic at the same time. And in fact, if we want to create change, that we must be both critical and pragmatic at the same time. There's no other way to make change that will help students in the short term, or institutions, that whatever we're working with, and also promote justice in the long, move toward justice in the long term. And then when it comes to standardized language and other kinds of normative language use, A CLA approach doesn't ignore the power of academic norms and standards, what I would call the status quo, the way things are, within departments, within programs, also outside the academy, but it aims to demystify and critique and then sometimes resist. And I'll talk more about the resistance piece a little bit later, those norms and standards. So we're not just saying resistance is the only goal, because as we know, with our own language use, our own languaging, we're often conforming with certain norms. The language I'm using in this presentation is relatively standardized and trying to fit within the discourse community of a writing studies or a WAC, and so sometimes I think there's almost a romanticizing of resistance, as if that's what we want students to be resisting all the time, resist genre expectations, language expectations, but that's not the real world. And again, we saw that in the other presentations here today. So this both and of being critical and pragmatic is really at the heart of CLA. So just very briefly, what are the roots of this? And I always want to say multiple times, I didn't come up with the term. It was actually first originated in the late 1980s. And it came out of the fields of critical linguistics and critical discourse analysis. I put just a few of the names who were active in that. And people were saying, how do we take that up in education? And so, and how do we take that up as part of liberatory or emancipatory literacy education? And I would argue today, how do we take that up as part of anti-racism education, which we'll circle back to in a moment. So the work of Paulo Freire was also influential in thinking about what critical actually means when it comes to education and when it comes to literacy. But the term also was part of this curriculum movement that was happening in the United Kingdom in the late 1980s when they had their first national curriculum. The US, in contrast, has never had a national curriculum for its K-12 schools, but they were putting together a curriculum and they wanted to talk about what kind of knowledge about language do students need through their English or literacy education. And so a group of scholars, linguists, and literacy specialists came together. They were brought together by the Parliament, and they ended up producing this curriculum that was much more social and political in nature. What the government officials sort of expected was a bunch of grammar exercises, or a bunch of sentence analysis or imitation, which, that can be part of a curriculum. But what the CLA brought was a much broader focus. It was really almost like sociolinguistics, understanding language variation, language in context, and also a rhetorical approach versus a prescriptive one-size-fits-all approach to writing and literacy. And there's a hyperlink there if you want to learn more about that specific program. It's kind of an interesting story. I also talk about it in chapter 2 of my book. And then the CLA, this framework, was taken up around the world. One notable person is Hilary Jenks in South Africa. She uses the term critical literacy now. She was using CLA for a while. And so sometimes those terms are used interchangeably in case that's useful. And she was adapting CLA approaches for the context of South Africa, which was going through this process of reckoning of what post-apartheid is going to mean for South Africa, including for the schools in the future. But CLA has also informed the work of a number of scholars in the US, some of whom were in K-12 contexts, and a few of whom are in higher education, and many cross both, like April Baker Bell goes across both. And so when you hear the term linguistic justice, oftentimes, or even translingualism sometimes, it's often referencing theories and concepts that came out of the CLA movement, but those ties are not always made explicitly, in part because of the geographic difference and also the disciplinary divide that continues between linguistics and writing studies. So that's just a tiny bit of the roots of CLA. So again, in my synthesis, I was looking at a number of case studies and also conceptual pieces about CLA. And these are the three themes that I kept seeing over and over again. What are the goals for CLA pedagogy? And the first at the top here is self-reflection when it comes to language. We want students to think about their linguistic identities, experiences, attitudes, behaviors. And then the second one is social justice. We want students to think again about language in relation to privilege, prejudice, discrimination, empowerment. And then this third goal, I think, is really crucial and is at the heart in particular of WAC work, rhetorical agency, that we want students to be empowered to make informed decisions as language users, as writers, so that they're getting to make the choice, but they're making the choice with a skill set rather than a blind choice or just having options, but not having any guidance about why would you want to use certain options? How will you benefit from choosing to resist a particular convention or choosing to write this in a different way or having contract grading or whatever, so that students feel that sense of agency throughout our writing curricula and throughout their writing experiences. That's really the goal. So some of the questions that I think CLA is particularly helpful to answering within the context of writing across the curriculum are first, how can we be both pragmatic and progressive in how we work with language, including with the tensions around standardized language and other normative languaging practices. And I should say this concept of languaging is actually very closely tied to rhetorical agency. Linguists started using this, Merrill Swain back in 2006, to try to capture the idea that language is more about a process than a product. It's a dynamic process. And so again, that idea of informed decision-making goes well with this idea of languaging. But of course, if we think about writing across the curriculum as including languaging across the curriculum, it adds another layer of, I think it foregrounds the language work that happens within WAC. So anyway, how can we be both pragmatic and progressive and working with the tensions? We can't get rid of these tensions. Those tensions are always going to be there about when do you conform and when do you resist, but we can work with them in some really interesting ways. And we can help faculty work with them within the context of disciplinary learning. How can we demystify and critique norms and standards in and across disciplines as part of students' academic socialization? And I think in the US, we don't use the phrase socialization as much as we could in US writing studies, but it's the idea that as you learn to write and communicate within a discipline, you start to feel a sense of belonging within that discipline, and learning about the conventions, even things like citation practices within a discipline, can help you feel a greater sense of belonging. How can we treat linguistic diversity as a resource in ways that really help students achieve their academic, professional, and personal goals? There's a lot of discussion, and there has been for over a decade, about linguistic diversity as a resource, but a lot of it stops at celebrate diversity. It makes me think of Sherry's, the term she used, pseudo equity, you know, like, oh yes, just by celebrating diversity, we're going to promote more just programs, assessments, curricula. That we know from multiculturalism work that just celebrating diversity does not necessarily lead to change. We actually have to have more than that. We have to think about what equity and inclusion really mean, and also how students themselves benefit from if we invite them to draw on multiple languages, codes, et cetera. And then how can we equip all students for powerful languaging across and beyond the academy? And I use the word powerful in multiple ways, both sort of their own sense of empowerment, but also that sometimes that if we are preparing students to be critical and but also to achieve their goals, they might be able to be change agents at institutions, in their future jobs, in their civic life, all of that. So that language becomes both an axis of power, but also a way of obtaining and using your power. So I'm not going to talk too much about CLA curricula, but I did want to show this slide in case you want a map. This was, again, after reading a lot of work and then also looking at my own teaching practice through the lens of CLA. I decided that I was seeing 4 overall kind of what I call pathways, kind of areas within CLA curricula. And I'm not going to talk through all of them, but I'll just say what's interesting. One of the benefits of bringing these in within a WAC context is that these often draw on scholarship in social sciences and other disciplines and humanities, I would say. I haven't yet made as many connections with STEM as I hope to, but maybe people will have suggestions for that in the Q&A. So sociolinguistics, the study of language variation, draws on sociology, anthropology, and linguistics. Critical academic literacies can actually be applied to any discipline where you're thinking about how your discipline is itself a linguistic community. How do we use language within this community? We can also talk about, I teach a course, English grammar concepts and controversies, and we get into some really interesting debates about prescriptivism, judging people based on what they should do with language rather than what they actually do with language. The third column here, media discourse analysis. I've drawn on research from political science, from the humanities, discourse analysis work of all kinds of texts, so we can link to those disciplines there. And then communicating across difference. I've often referenced research in psychology there about understanding how communication is shaped by social, both individual and social factors, and kind of how we negotiate difference as we communicate. So I know that's not very detailed, but I just want to give you that overall map. And I could say more about what a curriculum looks like, or you can go to the CLA Collective or read the book to learn more about the different ways CLA gets brought into curriculum. But I did want to say, for a WAC context, and what I want to unpack a little bit more here is the relevance to teaching a critical approach to academic literacies in and across disciplines. So one of the ways that CLA could really inform our work is in faculty development, helping faculty to be able to demystify their own academic expectations and connect those to the academic cultures of their institutions and of their disciplines. So I like to use the metaphor, if you've ever heard a little folk tale, there's different versions of this. David Foster Wallace shared one in a commencement speech he gave before he died. Basically, there's a couple fish swimming in the water, and a frog comes to the shore and she says, "Hey fish, how's the water?" And the fish say, "Water? What's water?" And academic culture and language ideologies are the water that we're swimming in all the time. And yet we don't often talk about it explicitly with students. We probably do more so within writing studies, but often faculty in their disciplines have never really thought about how to make really clear why we do what we do in writing or in communication in our disciplines. So some of the questions that I've brought into faculty workshops at Middlebury and at other institutions in a WAC context are these. Number one, how do the writing conventions for my discipline reflect particular academic values? Even a citation style I talk about in the book reflects certain things. You know, why does MLA almost always have page number? Because oftentimes it's used to do in-depth textual analysis, right? Close readings, et cetera. Why does APA include years? Because you're tracing social science research and you need to know, when was that study done? Was it done before this other study? So you can learn a lot by just unpacking why we do what we do. Also asking faculty, where can I broaden out the range of genres, languages, or styles included in my curriculum? And that could be in the things that we read or engage with. It could be media that incorporate. It can also be in assignments. And I'm linking these to 3 values that I'm gonna carry forth in the rest of what I share today. So the first value, unpacking conventions and their connection to culture, I see as part of access, just giving students access into the academy and into disciplines. And then the asset is how can we draw on make space for linguistic diversity within the curriculum, both in what students produce and in what they consume, for lack of a better word, what they read and engage with. And then number 3, how can my feedback and grading practices promote students' informed decision-making and their growth as writers, as readers, as speakers? And that I see is connected to agency. So if you're looking for a shortcut mnemonic for remembering what CLA is committed to, I would think of it as like a 3-legged stool: linguistic access, linguistic asset, and linguistic agency. And in my article for the WAC Journal, I go much more deeply into each of these and then show how they apply to different aspects of the work that we do in writing in WACWID. So as I said, CLA has implications for our feedback and response to students. In another piece that I have forthcoming in a chapter for a collection about feedback and response practices, Sarah Tinker-Perot, who's at OSU, I think she might be at IWAC, I don't know. And by the way, hi, Jeff. I heard that you're here too. Jeff and I have talked about CLA as well. So feedback is part of a dialogue with students. If we're going to promote their agency, we need to be in touch with them, giving them feedback, getting their feedback, all of that. When it comes to language use, one of my little mantras I give to faculty is focus on clarity rather than correctness, right? So you start to prioritize what's going to hinder the clarity of the writing. And let's focus on that when it comes to grammar and style and mechanics. And my numbering got off here. I also am not used to using Microsoft PowerPoint, so sorry for that. When it comes to language, one of the key things that CLA suggests is we should stop focusing on voice and focus more on choice. We all have different voices as we write. You know, as Walt Whitman said, I contain multitudes. And sometimes for second language writers or multilingual writers in particular, this concept of voice gets thrust on them, and then someone's saying, I don't hear your authentic voice. Well, Spanish is my second language, and I write at probably a 5th grade level in Spanish. And if someone told me they don't hear my voice going through, I would say, well, yeah, obviously, because I didn't do my academic studies in Spanish. So I'm not going to sound like a doctorate level person in my use of Spanish, but I can make informed choices if I start to write in academic ways in Spanish, which I have not yet done. And then the last point here that we often talk about is when we're commenting, and I think this has relevance again for what Sherry's talking about with labor-based grading, we can give students very focused, pragmatic feedback comments. But then when it comes to grading, we can grade in more progressive ways because students want that feedback. They want to be able to grow as writers. They want to be able to see I got from point A to point B. But they also shouldn't be disadvantaged by grading systems that are really outdated and only emphasize correctness or expect complete assimilation with no amount of differentiation in there. So if anyone wants to read this forthcoming chapter, I'd be happy to send it to you. It's currently pending, the revision of it is pending review, but it should be coming out in the collection, I think later this year or early next year. So I want to talk about it at the program and institutional level with a little bit of time that I have left. What does CLA offer? And Rogels, Gear, and Al had an article in the C's in 2021 where they talked about CLA and assessment, and they use this term communal justicing, that critical language awareness should be at the heart of the justice work that we want to do when it comes to assessment and when it comes to our professional standards and frameworks that we use in our disciplines. So, so some of the ways that we can actually think about this broader sustainable impact of critical language awareness, which again, very much reinforces or is in alignment with the goals of anti-racism. First is when it comes to DEI and anti-racism, we have to always bring in the thread of language. I'm shocked by how often I'm in some sort of event or meeting about anti-racism and no one mentions language once. We know that race and language are deeply interconnected. And in fact, there's a whole subfield of racial-linguistics now that looks at the complex intersections between language and race. So if we're talking about anti-racism, we have to be talking about language, because if we don't talk about language, people think they're being anti-racist, that pseudo-equity idea, but then they say things on student papers that are really alienating and marginalizing and not at all empowering or agentive for students. So one example of a writing program that's moving in this direction, really linking language to these other concepts, is Boston University. There's an article in a special issue of the Journal of Second Language Writing that I co-edited with Rebecca Lorimer Leonard at UMass Amherst, and by these two authors at Boston University. And they basically revised their program diversity statements to include more focus on language. And I put in bold some of the things I think are particularly noteworthy. So they said, and this is a public-facing statement that their program puts out, but they developed it in conjunction with their DEI person. I forget that person's title specifically, but in our classrooms, we aim to equip students with strategies to participate in academic and non-academic discourse communities, acknowledging the norms of academic writing. Even language itself are not static or monolithic, but are constantly evolving. We recognize the communication strengths of all learners and the value of multiple Englishes. And later on, they say, recognizing that language, I love this phrasing, language can be both an instrument of oppression and a tool for freedom and justice. We value, they go on to say what they do and how to link that to a culture of empathy, inquiry, and creativity. So they've explicitly brought forth language as connected to these other values that were already in circulation at their institutions, which I think is also another way to extend the impact. Leverage your institutional discourse, tap into your institution's values, statements, or whatever it is, so that you can actually show how language work and anti-racism work feed into those values and reflect those values. A couple of things when it comes to writing center work. I'm not a writing center person, but a number of writing center people have been in touch with me to say, I read about critical language awareness, and I'm starting to integrate that into my work with tutors. And one of those people is Jessica Bannon, who was she just left her work at the writing lab director at University of Indianapolis. And what she uses CLA to do is to provide some context for norms and standards. So with her tutors, she talks about questions like, why are some forms of language standard English? And it's in quotes because there's no one dialect that's standard English. It's actually quite complex. But why are those privileged? Who has historically had power to make those decisions? And what are the implications of continuing to adhere to certain standards? Now, that's not to say, so when you meet with a client in the writing center, you say, oh, forget all that stuff. It's just resistance, right? As I said, resistance is not always the goal. And oftentimes it's not what students want or need. And if they don't feel like they want and need that, I don't think it builds their agency to push that on them, right? But we can contextualize where those norms and standards come from, and we can name the fact that they're often leveraged in ways that are harmful to students from linguistic and racial minority groups, and also, linguistic minority. A few other strategies that I've seen writing center directors use. Dr. Jiang, I'm forgetting her first name right now, at the Florida International University, is using critical role play, where she says you have this scenario where a student comes in and wants you to proofread their paper, or a student comes in and says, I'm a terrible writer. What are you going to do in that moment? How can you infuse your critical awareness into that? Suzanne Schreiber at Madison College is working on building rhetorical grammar approaches so that students aren't just correcting grammar, they're helping students to make informed choices about grammar. And a number of other writing studies scholars have talked about this. And my own writing center director, Jeannie Giamo, has been building in, she had her tutors write an anti-racism statement, but they've also been bringing in linguistic justice awareness as part of the writing and revising of that statement. So those are just a few applications for writing center work. I want to conclude by saying, okay, so I've been talking about what CLA has to offer to writing across the curriculum, but how about the reverse? Because actually CLA scholarship very much needs some of the insights and models that WAC offers. So in particular, we need models for institutional collaboration and sustainability. And as we know, that's actually been the heart of a lot of WAC scholarship. And CLA, there haven't been, that I've seen in the literature yet, a lot of kind of institution-wide, what would it look like to take up critical languaging as part of our mission, as part of our curriculum, as a goal for students, building their rhetorical agency. And so I think we could draw on the strategies and insights and understandings of collaboration and sustainability within CLA work to make that, to have that, so that work has a greater impact. Ways to assess things at the programmatic and institutional impact. I really take to heart what Sherry was saying about not just focusing on the micro level or this is my own classroom, what goes beyond that. And I think there's a lot of great implications, and some of the contributors to the special issue that Rebecca and I co-edited are actually talking at a broader level about what does it mean to take up CLA in programs and institutions. But we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to look at what WAC has done and integrate that with CLA, or infuse CLA into that. And then rhetorical approaches to writing within world language classrooms. So particularly in the field of Spanish language instruction, there's been a large uptake of CLA. But what happens is they talk about it in terms of oral instruction. And when it comes to writing, they don't know what to do. And so they often default back to what they know, which is counting errors and taking a point after of each error. And so there have been calls for more conversation with WAC and world language or foreign language specialists. And I think looking at a rhetorical approach to writing versus a grammatical or prescriptive one could really benefit the Spanish language folks who are very committed to CLA, but don't really know how to take it up in their writing instruction and assessment. And I'm sure these are just a few of the ways that the WAC work could inform CLA scholarship and practice. So I am going to stop there and just say, if anyone wants a discount code for the book, I have one I could send to you. And then there's the link for the CLA Collective. As I said, I'll be hosting a number of events, just conversations, we call them salons, to talk about critical language awareness in relation to all sorts of things. I have one next week on creative writing and CLA, which I am not a creative writer, so I'm very interested to hear. It's with Joseph Salvatore at New School. So I will stop there. Thank you so much. Stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Shauna. So now you all can see why I'm so excited about this special issue, because these scholars here today represent 3 of the likely 11 that you'll find in the special issue. And I know from Dave Blakesley, those of you who have either edited a journal or been an author in a journal, you know it doesn't always go according to your original timeline. And so I just found out from Dave yesterday, I think it's likely that the fall 2022 issue will come out before this one. But so that just means we have the anticipation will build. But we're hoping, yes, so we're hoping also too, you should know that the editors of the WAC journal, they're putting on this conference. So that also led to the delay. So Cameron Bushnell, who you now know, if you didn't know her before, she's one of the main editors of the WAC journal. I just wanted to highlight something that Mandy, Sherry, and Shauna have really, the takeaway that I'll bring with me back to my campus is asking us to consider the different ways we can, quote, be critical and pragmatic at the same time, and not just simply, quote, romanticize resistance. That's really helpful, I think, when thinking about graduate student preparation, anti-racist practices, and how language awareness and critical language awareness can really inform what we do. And I think you'll find a similar thread in the pieces that will be in the journal in terms of multimodality, and 1 or 2 new theoretical frameworks to consider as we think about this work. And I want to turn it back over to these scholars so you can ask any questions. And so Shauna can hear, I'll ask that you speak into the mic. So I don't know, toss it. No, I'm just kidding. But I'll come around and try to be the mic. Oh, will it, Marley? Okay, thank you. Okay. Questions for Mandy, Sherry, and Shauna? Lindsay. Shauna, Lindsay Ives asks, has anyone done any critical language awareness work with STEM faculty? She has not, but she'd really like to. She's at Embry-Riddle in Daytona.
Oh, thank you so much for that question. Let's see, I've seen a little bit, it's not always called CLA, right? And that's one of the tricky things. Some of the translingualism scholarship, I would say, had a CLA bent, but sometimes it sort of stayed in that celebrate diversity, mindset. The work that I think best does that is actually going back to critical English for academic purposes work. And in my article, I talk about how, EAP and WAC they haven't been in conversation with each other much, even though they're very similar goals and a lot of similar approaches too. And so Sarah Benesh was I think she coined the term critical English for academic purposes. And she had a special issue and I think maybe an edited collection that included some STEM work. And then there's also been some great work on anti-racism in professional and technical writing that doesn't always use the frame of CLA, but is really moving in that critical way. But I would love to see future work. And in fact, if there's a group of people that wanted to get together and talk about how can this be taken up, I think the demystifying academic culture for students, you see evidence of that in some places, but there's even research suggesting that like even in the journal Nature, the use of I has been increasing. So there are subtle changes happening in academic discourse in STEM disciplines that I think students might be excited to learn about because it's never static. Norms and conventions are never static. So there's little bits of it here and there, but I think I could see a book collection or a special issue or something. I'd be happy to kind of help connect people through the collective who are interested in that. So thank you for the question.
I was going to say there's a couple of us here that are actually nursing faculty that were here. And as I was listening to this, I was thinking how great that would be for our students, because with them learning medical terminology, they're essentially learning another language. Because even if you want to work as a medical translator, you cannot translate, even though you may be fluent in that language, unless you're also pass a test for a medical terminology in that language. So I think that learning that and focusing it with a linguistic approach in terms of medical terminology would actually be very helpful for our students.
And there's been some great research. If you look up like critical discourse analysis, I want my next book to actually be critical language awareness across the curriculum, or at least that's the idea. I don't know what it will be called, maybe languaging across the curriculum. And I've just been gathering articles within the disciplines. And I actually just was encountering some articles recently that were talking about, okay, given that how to equalize the power dynamic between the practitioner, whether it's a nurse or a doctor or some other medical practitioner, and the patient. And so there are things you can do to make that discourse more accessible, so that, because oftentimes apparently patients will just pretend that they understand something, which of course as a medical, you need to know that they understand. And so what are the ways that we do that aren't patronizing? So sometimes this gets psychological, it gets social, but it can be informed by this critical idea of language and privilege and power. So there's some research out there. I haven't yet seen it infused into instruction that I know of, but it could also be a little burgeoning thing that I haven't been aware of. So
yeah, that's excellent, because we even talk about, even if they speak the same language as you, what is their educational level? Because you could be explaining something and they have a 4th grade reading level and they don't understand even though you're speaking the same language. So thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
One last question. Yep.
All right, so Dr. Craig, my question is, so we know that STEM and we know that tenured faculty are less likely to engage in the practices it used, as you talked about. For those of us whose job is negotiating with those faculty in order to be able to generate assignments and teaching plans and all of this, are there half steps? What is the negotiation that we can do conceivably, short of burning it all down? Yes, I know. So I know this might be asking for a little bit of a compromise on your standpoint or not. But what are some outcomes that we might expect pre-burn?
It was really challenging, especially in a writing studies context. Some of the feeling and like coming from an R2 to the R1, Virginia Tech. One thing that I'm noticing is not only are we in like the oldest and ugliest building, right? But that we're like the redheaded stepchildren who are in the worst building, right? Who like no one wants, like, oh yeah, you're family, but you're not really, like you're all wearing black and drinking coffee and we can't take you seriously. And this is, as we all said, black, but it's this really interesting. So one thing that I've been trying to do is to sort of think about, right? Because I struggle, because when we say like, oh, well, if we contract grade informal writing, or we allow students to use their language in informal writing, and that will feel good. and that will do the work. Well, what about the formal writing? And so like in conversations with STEM faculty and with tenure faculty, it's like, well, all work can be graded equitably. And I think that's true, sure. But the bridge with STEM faculty that I've seen and that I've engaged with is like, oh, well, if they do like a lab journal, a lab report journal, they can write that however they want. And I'll grade that in this looser way. But when I design that rubric for the formal lab report on that big 20% or chunker, there's no way in hell, because it has to look this way. And it really needs to say this way. And I'm professionalizing them into this discipline. And so those approaches to anti-racist pedagogy, not pedagogy so much, but like assessment and sort of evaluation, don't easily line up with professionalizing students into a discipline. And writing studies folks and writing cross-curriculum folks understand that. And so then they're like, oh, well, I can get away with it in first year writing, or I can get away with it in my major courses, or I can get away with it in my graduate courses. And for me, that's where that conversation stops, and why we will retain, as I sort of joke, the women in the basement, right? Because we're sort of like, yeah, like we can do this. This is where I have power. This is where I have control. These students, this semester, this class, I'm gonna do something. And if you've met me and you've got at least a cupcake or a glass of wine, I mean, you know, I'm very critical of Ibram Kendi, who works on the individual reflection and response, and what can you do and what do you know? And then you make that, you take it to other people, right? But we do that all the time. So I just wanted to go to other people and actually take action and tear this shit down. But I think the real effort is not what are we doing in writing studies, but what are my faculty in chemistry doing in their writing courses? But it's not about their writing courses, which we can make some concessions. I think we could make some movement in eventually, but in their curriculum. Because if it's only in the writing courses and it's some person who's really excited, that writing course is already a hard fought class. It's already a class that they're trying to do as much discipline work and as little writing work, sometimes, not all the time. And so like, what is that one class and that one chemistry degree major? And it's gonna be the one class that does this work? That's not sustainable. That's not possible. And that one instructor, who likely will be a female instructor or a younger instructor or a recently acquired instructor, or even a lecturer, because those writing classes are not somebody's research area, right? So that like duder who's been there for 45 years and comes in on Fridays. I'm just teasing you, Michael. Michael only goes to campus on Fridays. So I'm just teasing. That they're the ones, right? The people who go to diversity meetings are not the ones who need to be doing the diversity work. The people who are in the session right now are likely not the ones who need to be doing this kind of work. So then it becomes this effort of that whole systems approach that Jeff and the brilliance of Melzer and Crow have put together of, we really do need to take this much bigger. And we can't think small potatoes. We can start small potatoes, but we've been doing that for a bit now. And because it's so hard, we will keep doing that for a bit now and saying, look at us, my students who may not even want it are happier and better for it, because grading is hard and it makes me feel icky inside. It's not right. And so, yeah.
No, we're gonna
Shauna,
Can I add
you
something?
want, go ahead.
Just very briefly, yes to everything you said, Sherry. And I would just add, I think it's part of our responsibility to be looking at the other frameworks out there, like universal design and anti-racism, to kind of see where they overlap. Because I'm so tired of going to workshops where it's like 95% theory, and then they're like, okay, there's one slide on what you should do in your classroom. If you were to take that last slide of many of the different frameworks out there, trauma-informed pedagogy too, culturally responsive pedagogy, and you looked at what are it's often basic stuff about scaffolding instruction, about making expectations clear. Let's focus on the pedagogical work we want people to do. And then let's think critically about the framing we want to use to get them to go there. Because I don't always think we need to use the frame of anti-racism to get people to do the work we want them to do. I don't know if everyone here would agree with that, but I think sometimes we focus way more on the framing than the actual practice that we're hoping to see people employ.
And I'm tired of focusing on this. I'm tired of focusing on the students when it's our faculty who their identities matter in that classroom and their experiences matter in that classroom as much as those students who are rotating and will leave you in 15 weeks and you'll get a whole new batch. And that will change your pedagogy as well. So it's not about anti-racist assessment. It's about anti-racist pedagogy, because you could have anti-racist assessment and still be a hard-nosed, informed by white supremacist instruction and content delivery and the treatment of students and the treatment of your colleagues. And so what the hell are you doing? You're grading better, but you're not being better. You're still saying, sorry, your P&T packet isn't enough. Do more, write in these prominent journals, but we too are anti-racist. Like, it's just whole systems. Everything has to change. Everything gets to be burned down.
That was a great way to end. I now wish the special issue was called Transforming WAC at 50, Tear This Shit Down, or, so I look forward to Sherry's book with that title. Thank you all for being